Welcome to the Art of Conscious Living TV. I have a very special guest today, Christopher Love. We're going to talk about his life and times all the way from the 60s, 70s to the present time, and his journey in his spiritual quest to become the holistic whole person that unified with great awareness and awakening to his true nature. I'm very pleased to have him via Skype from Washington.
Thank you, Victoria. Thank you to all the people there at Conscious Living and to the crew especially that have worked so hard to get this to happen. And to all your viewers, welcome. You're in the right place. Welcome, welcome. Thank you.
Well, we're going to start at the very beginning. You have a life that is unbelievable. It seems like you have been the phoenix that's rising out of the ashes. So let's start at the present time. You are a very, very different being than you were as what happened when you were a child. You had a very, very troublesome time when you were a child due to a very abusive father and a home life that could have really destroyed you and has taken down many people, actually. But you took that and you rose from the ashes of all of that to become this incredible, aware, beautiful, open-hearted, loving person.
Well, thank you for that, all those generous, kind words. It's actually a little bit beyond rising from the ashes. I have heard this before, and I think that most people have these challenges that I have. This is not unique to me, even the abusive father, to the extent that he took it. This is the challenge for all people right now. Everyone on the planet has these challenges. We're all pushed to find happiness. We're all trying to end our suffering. We're seeking. This comes in pleasures and other things. But it's never satisfying. It's never the end of the suffering. So I started early, seeking the end of the suffering. Please, you look like you were going to say something.
Well, let's start about the beginning of the suffering in your childhood. Actually, what happened in this abusive family that you came from and your relationship with your father?
Well, I have a willingness to speak about this only because there's a possibility that it can benefit others.
Mm-hmm.
The point of the whole thing that I'd like to share is that underneath all that suffering that I speak of is a oneness, the source of oneness, even. What is behind the concept of God. This word God has many different definitions from many different traditions from around the world. What I'm speaking of and what I'm pointing to is that is the source of all these definitions, if you will. So what's behind that concept of the word God, what we all know as something, the creator, or whatever words we use for it, it is that, capital T, that we seek. And it is that who we are. We are that. And it's the discovery of that which is the end of the suffering, and the beginning of freedom, and the bliss of living. I know you want to get to some of the stories.
Well, this is the present knowing, but did you know this when the abuse was happening to you as a child, of what you spoke about?
So,
did you have glimpses of it, or did you have a full, or was it a gradual awakening to this?
There was glimpses, and it's like, you're a gold miner, you find some gold dust, and you have this incredible passion to find the gold mine. So yes, at 4 years old, I had a glimpse. I was in the back of my father's 57 Studebaker. We were driving to my aunt's wedding in San Francisco. And they shared that we'd be in a church. So I asked what a church meant, and my mother said something like the name word Jesus, the name Jesus Christ. And something happened in that moment to me. I was looking out the window and half listening to my father talk about how stupid everybody is to believe in an unknown, unseen, untouchable, entity. And I looked out the window and I felt like, wow, if God is all being, then it is in all those trees that I see passing by my window. It's in all the cars that are driving in the other direction. It has to be within me as well. And I had realized in that instant that there was something much bigger than I. This lasted maybe another 15 minutes as I just stared out the window. And the next glimpse maybe was at age 7. But, this whole time, I was being abused, the extent of which is quite severe. It's hard to see our inner pain, but I have the scars to show, where he put the cigars and cigarettes out of my arms, where he beat me with a belt on my back and my legs to the extent of bleeding. So there's scars like you might received if you were whipped. He branded me. He broke bones as soon as I got as tall as he is. So this was my experience. I've had a broken left arm, my neck broken twice, my back broken a couple times, my left knee dislocated, my right shoulder dislocated, my nose broken a dozen times at least. So now that we can maybe get that sort of description of abuse out of the way.
Was he an alcoholic? Was he drinking during these episodes?
Yes, I know. This is a good question. He was. Both my parents were alcoholics.
So he was in a raging blackout, as they say, as an alcoholic, and it was a lot of anger and a lot of
rage.
Rage, yeah.
Yes, I thought it was normal, believe it or not. I thought this was normal until I think it was the 8th grade, and I went to a friend's house and had dinner with his family, and their father, this guy, my friend's father, wasn't pounding his fist on the table. He wasn't drinking 8 ounces of vodka at a time, I thought, wow, this is so different. He's actually kind. These are gentle people, where my brother and sister and I and my mother lived in constant crisis, constant terror, because you never knew. You just couldn't know when he would explode. And again, this is not just my experience. I know many, many, many others have this in their history.
And as this was happening to you, how did you deal with it? Being so young and so innocent and not prepared for all the great physical pain and suffering and emotional pain that you were going through.
Yes.
What did you do with all of that at such a young age?
I went inside. I went into my own being. One of the things that I enjoyed was laying on a couch, playing Hank Williams Sr. albums, the blues, these tearjerkers. I would put a pillow over my head so I wouldn't be seen, if that makes sense. And I would just lay there for hours at a time and listening to music. And so music was a big, core thing for me when I was young. It was my escape, or what brought me some peace. It was my refuge, It was my spiritual refuge.
Was your mother abusive also, or was she just watching it all and not participating?
Both.
Both.
She was a witness to it, but,
She had her moments where she would physically strike out at you also?
Oh, well, yeah, she was only 4'11", and I'm 6'2". I think I was 6'1" in the 8th grade, so she would pick up a 5-foot piece of 2x4 and hit me in the back of the head. Sucker punch me, So, yeah, I'd wake up on the ground a couple times from her. But this is all learned behavior, right? This is the learned behavior that she experienced from her husband, and this is how she learned to relate to her children. Now, I don't hold any animosity towards any of these, my parents. There's a moment of forgiveness that just happened on its own. On that moment of awakening in spiritual retreat, silent retreat with my teacher Gandhiji. In that moment of awakening, it was all released. There was a fire that burned everything up. So there's perhaps the phoenix rising. But
Well, was there ever moments between the abuse that was going on from childhood up until the age of 21 that you just maybe wanted to give up? You just didn't want to be here, or you became very, very depressed, or you acted out in any fashion?
Well, yeah, but the thing I did, see, there was a farmer near where we lived that recognized that my father was beating me. And he gave me a job at age 15 and gave me an old 1956 Chevy pickup truck that was literally had the grass growing through the bottom of it, you know, the rust coming out of the bottom of the vehicle. Well, I took that and I rebuilt it, totally rebuilt it at age 15. And at age 15 and a half, I started that truck up when I had my driver's license and drove out. I left home at age 15 and a half and never looked back.
And so you had, when you say you never looked back, you had no contact with your parents anymore at all?
When my mother passed away, soon after that, actually, I spent some time with her on her deathbed, of course. And I went and confronted my father because he was such, you know, an animal. But, you know, anytime anybody walked up to my father, he'd always pull out a gun and hold it on his lap, you know, and every once in a while wave it around and point it at you. So it was useless. There was no point any longer. I had some fear, clearly, of him. He had said many times he would kill me, cut me up in pieces, feed me to the pigs. That was his favorite saying. And I knew that he was capable of this because, like that farmer I mentioned that gave me the truck, my father kept saying for 6 months, I'm going to gut that guy. I'm going to cut him with a knife from his pubic bone up to his heart and pull all his guts out of him.
And why was he venting to this man? Was he jealous of him?
Anything. Well, it's a little bit of a longer story. There were some people that were finding out that he was embezzling from the water company there where we were living. And this farmer was one of them who, you know, was attacking him and trying to prove that he was a criminal because he didn't like what he saw when he saw my father beat me, you know. This man ended up being murdered. He was found not long later with his guts spilled out, exactly how my father had described it. So he was also not like the serial killers you see on TV that do it out of the need to do it. He would murder people if they just got in his way. If they were, you know, threatening in any way, murder was the answer. He'd just take care of it. In fact, there was another person that was involved in the investigation of his embezzlement, trying to get him locked up. He was killed 3 days later as well. So these two men were murdered within 3 days or 4 days of each other. And, you know.
Do you think there's any relationship of that to your father? Or was it just a coincidence?
Sorry. No, there was no doubt. In fact, he showed me how he murdered the second man, who was actually kind of a beloved mayor in that little community where we were.
But he was never arrested for any of these or charged?
No.
And then he passed on, so all these are history.
Right. And he murdered his own aunt, my great aunt. You know, he got a phone call that he was going to receive the inheritance, and he jumped in his car, drove out to Iowa. I told my mother he's going to kill her. My mom said, no. I said, oh yeah, he's going to kill her. I know it is. I know he is. And before he returned home, you know, he disappeared on this mystery trip. He just said, I'll be back, and I'm not telling anybody where I'm going. Before he returned home, we got the news from family members in the Midwest that she had died. And, you know, there's just no room for doubt. There's just no room for doubt. And this is actually the week that I had left home, this very same week.
Well, I just want to stay with this subject a little bit longer before we move on to after you left home. But during this time, did you have any hatred within you for this terrible situation that you were going through, and this man that was bringing such pain and suffering and horror to your life. Was there any moments where you had that
Yes.
you wanted to inflict the same kind of pain that he was giving you? You wanted to
Oh,
give it to
no.
him.
No. I wouldn't have done that. But there was a time where I really wanted to drive up in a limousine with a couple of beautiful women, one on each arm, and piss on his grave. Yeah. You know,
I mean,
my
after the fact, after he died.
no. The whole time after I left home, I had this vision of, becoming a rock star, right? I'd have all this power and money and women and a limousine that would take me to his grave just to, pee. No, when he died, it was a celebration and a release,
Right.
It,
A lot of freedom. You felt freedom.
yes. Even though I had, already forgiven him and even wrote to him and told him that I had forgiven him.
What
when
was his reply in your forgiveness?
Sorry. I went to this church and this lovely teacher was speaking about forgiveness, and I bought the little cassette that, was recorded during her talk, and I listened to it for a month every day, and I would handwrite this forgiveness letter to him. So finally I mailed it. And my sister called me and she tells me, Dad got your letter and he told me that you told him you were sorry. And I just went, perfect. So he didn't get it, and I didn't care. The process was for me.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, moving on from your childhood, and you left
Thank
home
you.
at 15. Is it painful to reflect back to it and think about it right now? Do you
No.
have any do you have any kind of uneasiness about reflecting on it? I know you feel.
No.
I know you have a sense where it plays no part in your life anymore, and it's finished and over. But even if there's a stain of it, and it actually is the making of you, it's who you are today. As wide open as your heart is today, the grace that you know today is in measurement of the suffering that you have known, the path that you have walked.
Yeah, I don't take credit for anything like that. It's just we all, like I said a moment ago, we all have these challenges. This is not unique to me. But you did say this word grace just now, and this is the grace that I received. And it's hard to understand that for many, but this is the grace that I received from my Father. Because what I always tell people is that the suffering points us to what is not suffering. We're all seeking happiness, right? And so in that seeking of happiness, or to the end of suffering, I turned over every stone I possibly could in my search. But what's interesting too is that the day after I left home, and I was with a friend, and I had a spiritual experience, another mystical experience. My life has been full of these mystical experiences, okay? And in that experience, I realized once again, there is only oneness, and all people in the world are this oneness, this one being. It includes the earth and the entire universe. We are all that, okay? Now, in that moment at age 15, I felt like if everyone in the world would just see what I see and I'm holding right now in my heart, there would be peace on earth. So that this was the moment that cemented in me my passion to help create peace on earth. And I threw myself into that in everything I did.
And what were you seeing and feeling in your heart as you express at that moment in time? Give us a glimpse into that, please.
Well, I think it would be best to explain or try to express, because there's no words, ultimately for what I'm pointing to, is at the moment at age 40, 25 years later after I left my family, I was sitting in satsang, in silent retreat with Gandhiji, a 2-week silent retreat. At day 4, I thought I was going to lose my mind. But that was the point, you see. And so in that moment of liberation, I would rather speak of than the one at 15, because in that, there was, again, there's no words, so all I can do is try. Poetry is very welcoming when you're trying to express mystical experiences, but there was just nothing but all love. I mean, the love was just running over me as if I was being poured on with a golden nectar of bliss, if you will. And it was just overflowing. There was nothing stopping it. And everywhere I looked, everything was a large smile. Like the trees had a smile. The rocks in the dried riverbed were all smiling at me. I looked at the sky, and the sky was smiling. It was like, wow, everything is awake and smiling because maybe I woke up or everything was already awake. This was later explained to me when I asked Gandhiji about it, was, yes, everything is awakened when you wake up. You see everything as awakened. This is the love that now is going to be revealed to you, forever, forever.
So you're seeing things of how they really are naturally, innately. Everything is in a positive, pristine, happy, positive, love-based
Love.
way. Yes.
Love is probably really the only word that could touch it.
Right.
And many of us think love as this romantic love. And well, sure, we experience love in a romantic way, of course, beautiful, blissful. But this is beyond that. That's why I say it's beyond the phoenix rising, because it's really like the phoenix rising and then blasting through into space and becoming that space itself, where within me, everything,
right,
everything's within me.
So
everything's within you.
Right.
Everything's.
So when one is feeling depressed or fear or in anger or being abused of, and they retreat into themselves, such as what happened to you as a child, even though that love-based energy is all around us, we are disconnected from it. But it's still there, and
Yes.
and we basically there's no receptivity to it.
So what gets in the way of everyone realizing that they are that, capital T, that which they seek, is the ego. And this is a great question, because when we're born, actually there's some science that says even before we're born, there is trauma in the birth canal that starts the ego's fixation on fear itself. So this nestles in right next to our survival strategies. Now, as a baby and as a young person, we are conditioned by our environment. So our parents, for a fine example, where we live, our community, our tribe, our country, our nation, our religious beliefs, we're influenced and conditioned by all authority figures. So now, if people out there do not know that they're living a conditioned existence, then this is great news, right? I mean, we have to stop blaming our parents for all the stuff that's going on in our lives. Move on, take responsibility for our actions and our choices. So when one feels this depression or anger or fear or shame or whatever, I tell them to embrace it fully, but take their awareness out of the storyline that, like for me, oh, poor me, my father beat me. Oh, poor me, my mother beat me. You take your awareness away from the storyline and into the fear or the anger or the hurt. Now,
And
hurt,
so you feel the hurt and you feel the emotions and you go through to the other side of it. But
yes,
but
that's right.
not get looped into the story of it, as you mentioned.
That's
where
right.
when you do that, you become the victim, and there's no possibility there except looping into the story over and over and over, and that blocks off all awareness and all any possibility. There's no possibility when you're locked down into a story.
Well, we get attached. The ego
Yeah.
gets attached to its fixations.
Yeah.
The fixations, again, are hurt, anger, and fear. Now, out of those core fixations of ego, We can spread out in all sorts of different directions, but the core fixations of ego are hurt, anger, and fear. And what's underneath all of those is fear. So it's hurt, anger, and fear that drives personality. Okay, this is important. But under that driving force of personality is yet more fear. And eventually, if we continue to hold our awareness on maybe our hurt or our anger or fear without the story, as you say, then we realize that that hurt or anger or fear never really existed. This is the invitation, and this is the secret teachings that are not secret. You know, this is something that no one really knows, and I'm here to tell everyone who is willing to listen that all we have to do is bring our awareness into that hurt or anger or fear and not hold the story while we're feeling it. And that feeling disappears. It's released. And what's underneath that is, you know, something else that you might have to discover. But still, this is the process.
Let's return back to you were with Gandhiji, you were on the 4th day, you saw all this love and all this clarity and all this beautiful spaciousness around you. And there's tremendous amounts of golden light of love flowing through you. How long did that stay with you? And was it fleeting, or did you have moments where you could return to that years after?
Oh, I've never left.
It's never left.
No, but see, during the rest of this retreat, I was in absolute bliss. I stayed in bliss for 3.5 more months. Gandhiji had asked me to her private quarters and asked me to do some work for her, basically do some editing to transcribe the retreat that I was at, edit it, put it into what would become perhaps her first book. So I went into back to where I lived on Orcas Island in Washington State at the time and spent 3.5 months in silence transcribing and editing and getting it to a place where Gandhiji and her foundation approved of the work. Okay, wait, I lost my place. What was the, oh, remind me where we are. You know, there's no tracks in memory sometimes when I'm just.
That's all right. Well, the question was, how long did you stay in that bliss state, which you answered. You said you stayed there for 3 months. But after the energy dissipates somewhat, who are you today in being able to access that beautiful feeling of love and expansive energy and spaciousness? Are you able to access it at will now? Or are you able to come in and out of it? Or, yes.
It's, well, you have to tell me. You know, it is in every breath. It is in everything I see. I can look at anything and see God reflected in that. Okay? So ever since that moment, this is the way it's been. But I need to qualify that by saying that upon a spontaneous awakening, you don't become fully enlightened. I mean, in history, there has been, you know, moments where, like, the Buddha sat for 7 days under the Bodhi tree and became so fully enlightened that he knew everything in an instant, was fully enlightened. So there's an awakening, and then there's a deepening of that awakening. The Buddhists have different levels for the Bodhisattva. And so I went into deepening my awakening, and anything that got in that way, I pushed out of my life, including a beautiful relationship, a very powerful, potent thing that I wanted in my life my whole life. And I'd already had 2 failed relationships, so this was bliss, but it wasn't. I had to finally end that relationship because it wasn't serving my awakening. And I had made a commitment at age 15 to help create peace on earth. And all we did was argue about who was more enlightened, if you will. That's not really the truth, but that's, you know, that's an example of the arguing. This is what I dealt with her. Was no, my hit of LSD makes me way more powerful and more wise than you. Okay, right. If that's what you want. Go ahead, please.
So,
sorry.
What is enlightenment to you now, today?
What's enlightenment? Wow. That's a big question, what's
Mm.
enlightenment?
Well, let's contemplate that.
Well,
Let's be curious about that for a moment.
there's a saying that says, if anyone says they're enlightened, they are not, which is true. Because if anyone says they're enlightened, it's the ego, once again, identifying to something. Now, anyone that is fully enlightened will say enlightenment doesn't even exist. So this is what I say now. Enlightenment doesn't even exist because in that wholeness and that oneness that's behind the concept of the word God, there is no one to be unenlightened. Does that make sense? There is only this oneness, and even saying one is too many because that maybe gives someone the idea that there's two or more than one or
Right.
whatever.
Well, we're going to need to clarify this.
Please.
Because no one, you're saying that even if no one is unenlightened, so what do you mean by that? And where do we go with this of trying to navigate through who you are today and how you live your life today with all of the great history you have had and how you've transgressed all that to become the open-hearted, peaceful person you are today? Would you say that that is
That's a lot.
Would you say that that is an attainment of enlightenment? That's an aspect of it, of being able to connect to the peace within you and the goodness within you, and the simplicity and quietness within you, instead of in the reactive mind and mode of being.
Oh, I can be reactive, but yes, the answer is yes. My experience is that
Well, you say
I am fully aware.
Okay, sorry.
No, go ahead. What were you going to say?
No, please go ahead.
I was going to say that my experience right now as being Christopher
Yes.
is that I'm fully aware, and in the present moment, and this is what all spiritual teachers eventually want to point everyone to, is the absolute present moment. Is in this absolute present moment, I feel, and feel is a key word here, I feel intuitively everything that's in front of me. I am fully aware of what's happening, and I can just sit back and smile. I have no attachment to what comes in my life, no attachment to what goes in my life. I have no attachment to what stays in my life. This is the freedom of the present moment. So also in that being awareness, because this is where I'm pointing to, is that we are all created in the image and likeness of what people call God. We are that consciousness. We are God consciousness itself, Buddha nature. But we have to take this word God out of the mix, okay? We are that which we seek, being we are all this oneness. And in that oneness, which is all only awareness itself, there's there's no words. Sorry. There is an experience of anything and everything. How do I say this? What you focus on expands, okay? Scientists speak about this. I'll give you an example. I'll try to give you an example. I have reached different states of samadhi, what people call samadhi, which is usually, a blissful place people don't even want to come back into their body from. But for now, one of my experiences in the state of samadhi is that I'll be laying in bed. My body will be totally relaxed, even deeper relaxed than in deep sleep. But my awareness is aware of everything surrounding me, the whole neighborhood. I can feel what's going on with, I don't have close neighbors, but I can feel what's going on around me. Like, for instance, this is the key word here, this moment where, like the bird, the first song that happens out of that bird's mouth out my bedroom window in the morning, when it breaks the silence, when I hear it, I already knew that it was about to happen. Now, this is really hard to understand or grab onto, but in that awareness, I don't not only know all about this individual being, this bird, but all of its species. Okay? So this is the flood of intelligence, of God intelligence, of the awareness of this bird and all that's behind it. Now, anything that comes into my experience, I can hold my awareness on, and it will open up and reveal all its secrets. Did any of that make sense?
Absolutely.
So,
You mentioned a key word a moment ago that really is important to highlight and to note, and you said attachment. And
yes,
it's where everything, so if we don't have attachment, attachment will cause us to loop into the story, and that's where the story starts. And without attachment, we still feel what's happening, but we don't get so personal with it, and we use it as a teacher to guide us, not to disclose our pain and
yes,
release us from the pain, but not to wallow in the pain, and that's where the attachment would happen.
yes, yes, yes,
So
yes,
it's very important for people who are listening to us to understand the idea between being attached and being aware and living with awareness and
yes. Thank you.
using everything as a teacher
Yes,
to release us from that attachment, so we have this complete lucidity and understanding and clarity to our life.
yes, yes. Thank you. Thank you. Very, very well said. The attachments bring us back to the ego again. And this word called witness, this word we're using as a witness, you sit back as a witness and you can watch what comes and goes. Okay? This is being unattached. There's no hooks that grab you and pull you back into the horror of your life. But there's also these attachments that we throw hooks into the future. You know, this is the desire and attachment that Buddha speaks of. You know, the source of all suffering is attachments. The source of all suffering is desire. Well, the source of all suffering is ego. Let's bring it down to that. The source of all suffering is ego. We want happiness. We're seeking freedom from suffering. So we throw hooks out into the future to pull in what we think is going to bring us that happiness.
Yes.
And our plans, I don't know if there's anybody out there that has ever had their plans come out exactly how they wanted it to happen, okay? So our plans show up in a way that's continue to serve us on our purpose to awaken. And this is really what we're all here on this planet to do, is to awaken spiritually. So,
Right.
Please, go ahead.
Well, we just have a few moments left, actually, Christopher.
Really?
Yes, actually. And I'd like to ask you, if you were to give some advice to others, what would be the most important words of your wisdom that you'd like to share with others to be able to help them to live a life that with more meaningfulness, a life that's more balanced, a life that they would know the freedom that you share in your life?
2 words. Be still. These are the words that are spoken from the mystics of every tradition since the beginning of time. Be still. Keep quiet. Stop. Eventually, the great good luck of awakening will bring someone to the feet of their final teacher, the Sat Guru, if you will. Sat meaning truth. Final. Guru, you know, the teacher. To the Sat Sangha, the truth community. So when you come and sit with a master like that, and I've sat with many, you come to this place where that teacher looks you in the eye and says, stop. This is what Gandhiji said to me, and I trusted what she said. She said, stop. Put all the books next to your bed down. Put them away. Stop all the spiritual practices that brought you to this moment. All those beautiful spiritual practices. Just stop. Stop seeking. It's not outside of who you are. And this is the great mistake because we're throwing hooks into the future and such. Stop seeking. It's right here. It's right now. It's in the produce aisle at the grocery store, okay? It's in your kitchen. It's in your bathroom. It's everywhere. It's right here and it's right now. There's nowhere to go. Just be still. Be still means quiet the mind. Quieting the mind brings you to an awareness into your heart center, away from the ego attachments, all the attachments that we've built from childhood, the structures of ego, the structures, you know. Once we have met our survival strategies, what's next? Be still. Be still. Stop. Stop thinking. Stop looking. Stop seeking. Be still. Stop. Those are the final words that come from the final teacher. Stop. And
well, thank you for that insight, and it's very important, yes, for us to quiet our minds down and don't get so locked into our thoughts and identifying with our thoughts all the time, henceforth the ego.
yes. Yes.
It's been an absolute pleasure and an honor to speak with you, and I totally would say to you that somebody who's had the past and the life that you've had, and many others have had and lived, and you've taken the life of being gentle and open-hearted and kind to yourself and kind to others.
Thank you.
That is something in itself, a great victory, and you have not let your horrible childhood define you of who you were going to be for the rest of your life.
No. And I don't.
Because this can easily happen and has happened to many people. So I would just like to leave it at that moment in time and say that anybody who is facing great pain and suffering at whatever age they're at, a child, a teenager, an adult right now, a woman in an abusive relationship or whatever, there's always something on the other side of that, and it's up to us
Yes.
to stay with our heart and to stay with our heart wide open.
Yes.
And let that heart guide us.
Yes. Follow your heart.
This is not the end, and this is not the be all and is all of what is happening at this moment in time.
No.
So
No.
let's not get lost into that. It's always shaping and reshaping and unfolding and transforming into something else.
Love itself is waiting to greet us all. It's right here and right now. You will overflow with the love that I speak of, so much so that your only choice is to give it away. Because the more you give away, the more you receive, and you deepen in that love awakening. And that's all there is, and that's all you see, and that's all you express.
So be it. Thank you.
Thank you.
And from the art of conscious living, do take care of yourself and take care of others. Thank you.